being respectful and friendly when you're out on inspection and you're meeting homeowners and home buyers and home sellers, right? And treating everyone in a respectful, friendly way can really go a long way.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Justin Harris.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Sure, glad to have you. Got a great guest coming up, a friend of mine. Can't wait to introduce you. First, want to pause and remind you that we're sponsored by two great companies. Of course, Alamode, been a sponsor from the very beginning. Great company, the leader in appraisal writing software, and there's a reason. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can call them 800-ALAMODE. Of course, we're sponsored by OREP. OREP is my choice for E&O insurance and all kinds of benefits that come with that. You can find out more by going to their website at orep.org. That's OREP.org. And speaking of OREP, a good friend of mine, Mr. Isaac Peck, over at OREP, and of course the editor at Working RE Magazine. Welcome back to the program, my friend.
Justin, I am super happy to be here and a big fan of the podcast.
Well, I'm a big fan of you. So this is a mutually good conversation we're going to have here. You've been on the program, of course, several times, being the editor at Working RE Magazine. Of course, everybody should be subscribing to, if you will, signing up for the free email that goes out on a pretty regular basis if they want to keep up on what's going on in the appraisal industry. And speaking of that, I want to talk a little bit today about appraiser liability. It's probably not the most sexy topic for our listeners, but it's such an important topic. I'm just going to throw it at you, first of all, Isaac. Why is appraiser liability even something we should be thinking about?
Well, I mean, there's risks and liability present in the job for appraisers. We've kind of seen a lot of things in the last decade or two, right? The periods of great calm where not a lot of people are coming after appraisers, and then periods where, hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits are being filed against appraisers. And so it's a reality that appraisers face.
What would make in your mind, as you see, from your perspective, you say there's times that are busy when it comes to appraiser liability, or we're going to see more lawsuits, we're going to see more people or companies going against appraisers, and times when it's not. Do you kind of have a feel for what those times are? When is it slower when it comes to, I say slower, but slower for the insurance companies when it comes to liability versus more busy?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as you know, and many appraisers might know, that there were a lot of lawsuits filed against appraisers after the market crash of 2007, 2008. Hundreds and hundreds and at least maybe 1,000 or two individual lawsuits against appraisers throughout the United States. The FDIC hired a crack team of lawyers to go around and sue 500 appraisers or so, and some insurance companies tried to exclude FDIC claims. And so there was a huge kind of explosion of lawsuits and legal trouble for appraisers post-crash. And since that time, there's been, a decline in claims where, appraisers are not getting sued as often. And insurance rates have gone down for appraisers over the last decade and a half. And so it kind of, as we sit at this present moment where the market is showing signs of starting, maybe turning a little bit.
Maybe.
I think that there's good cause for appraisers and insurers of appraisers and folks that are involved in the business, like myself and OREP, to be extra cautious here and do what we can to protect ourselves.
So let me pare it back what I think you're saying here, because it's clear to me. I want to make sure that we really hammer this home. As we look back historically, and of course that's what appraisers do, right? We love to look at historic trends. That's what helps us come up with what we feel is the best value on an appraisal report is what are other things selling for. If we apply that same logic to what you're talking about, then we can look back to 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, right? And there were these lawsuits. Correct me if I'm wrong, Isaac, but these lawsuits were going back to 2006, 2007, when people were madly out there getting all kinds of refinances, purchases, whatever, at these lower interest rates and these crazy loans. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is you've got now buybacks, you've got situations where the market's dropped, and everybody's looking at somebody to point to, and guess what? Appraisers are on that list, right?
Yeah, exactly. Appraisers tend to get sued when markets decline and markets crash.
So as far as right now, would you agree with this statement that the chances of getting sued on something that someone is doing, say a year from now, 6 months from now, is probably less than a report that they did last year, 2020, 2021, when it was so busy that we couldn't even keep up with the volume?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so let's get specific. Let's talk a little bit about not that we're a fear-based program here. We certainly want to have some hope, and we definitely will move in that direction here. But I want to make sure that everything is on the table, that we don't just close close our eyes to what the reality is. What specifically should appraisers be worried about?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things to be mindful of, right? One is that it, depending on where the market goes, the claims against appraisers may increase a little bit. They may, increase proportionally. So we may be on the precipice of kind of a shift in a shift in the wind per se, in terms of appraiser liability and claims that appraisers might be facing. So in that sense, you'd really want to make sure that you've got strong insurance coverage, that you're insured with a program that specializes in defending appraisers, that has been doing it for decades, that has attorneys that know the space really well. And you'd want to try to button everything up, make sure the reports that you're doing now are as good as they can be. And then, I mean, the other thing that's happening now is kind of a lot of talk about discrimination in appraisals. We've got hundreds of HUD complaints being filed against appraisers alleging discrimination. And so we are seeing kind of a drastically increased activity around discrimination complaints against appraisers. Right. And those, my understanding is that those have been referred to the Washington, D.C. office at HUD. And, the senior leadership in the current administration are reviewing those. And so appraisers have something to be worried about there. And there, are some steps that can be taken to protect them.
Right. I want to talk about that as far as, what are some practical ways appraisers can protect themselves as they're doing these reports, if these things come in, in other words, you get wind that maybe there's a lawsuit coming your way. But first, I want to pause here and talk to you a little bit about OREP. Isaac, tell me a little bit about OREP. You talked about a reputable company. You talk about insurance and what that does, what that doesn't do. There's a lot of different companies out there. And let's just be honest, most appraisers don't give a second thought to it, right? It's whoever they're with now, probably going to be the same year after year after year. They just write out that check, they fill out that application, they just keep. What makes OREP different than other companies out there in your mind?
I mean, so we've been specializing in appraiser insurance for over 20 years now. And our policy is specifically designed for appraisers, meaning that we provide, up to $500,000 of coverage for discrimination claims.
Wow.
We provide $100,000 for bodily injury and property damage. So if you're at the subject property and you break something or someone gets hurt while you're doing an inspection, we provide $100,000 of coverage for that. And most appraiser policies don't provide that coverage. Lots of appraiser policies and professional liability policies generally actually exclude discrimination coverage. So having, $100,000 of coverage for discrimination or $500,000 of coverage for discrimination is a huge advantage for appraisers. And the other thing that we do is we provide, professional support for the appraiser. So we've actually got Craig Capilla, a trial attorney out of Illinois, who's been defending appraisers for over a decade. He's running points on almost all of the state board and HUD discrimination complaints that come in against OREP, and all OREP insureds, and all of our members enjoy a 1-hour consultation with Craig at no charge.
Wow.
And so, I can't speak highly enough of the importance of having an experienced legal team and experienced professionals defending you in the appraisal space if you're ever facing trouble as an appraiser.
Love OREP. OREP.org, folks, is where you find out more. OREP.org. Also want to talk to you about Alamode. Alamode, of course, is my software of choice. It's been for a long, long time. Forever. Almost 3 decades for me. They've been in business, I don't know, maybe it's 4 decades now. They've been out there a long time, folks, and there's a reason that they lead the industry. You can learn more, and you should. If you're with any other company, check them out. Go to alamode.com. Or you know what? Pick up the phone, call them. They will actually answer the phone, and they will tell you why they're different. It's alamode.com or 800 Alamode. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We're talking with Mr. Isaac Peck at OREP Insurance, also the chief editor at Working RE Magazine. Welcome back, Isaac.
Thanks again for having me, Dustin.
Well, we got to, you're welcome, and thank you for being here. We talked a little bit about, I don't know, maybe the negative. I don't know if I want to call it negative because I think it's realism, right? We need to be aware as appraisers as to what's going on. We need to make sure that we know what's in the atmosphere. And but I want to end on a positive note here, Isaac, and talk a little bit about. I don't want to dive too deeply into the whole racial bias thing or some of these other things, but we need to know they're out there, right? So the question on the table then is, how do we as appraisers best protect ourselves from lawsuits?
I know I'm just the life of the party over here, Dustin. I'm talking about how appraisers can get sued.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've got a couple recommendations, and I guess dealing with the discrimination, there are specific words and language that appraisers need to be mindful of, and not remove from their reports and stop putting into their reports, such as inferior versus superior neighborhoods. So this is a desirable neighborhood. This is an affordable neighborhood. This is an integrated community. This is a crime-ridden area, right? And so that there are specific buzzwords and language that appraisers need to stop using. The politically correct, quote unquote. And unfortunately, that's I'm not the PC police here, but that's the reality of
no, it's reality.
Liability environment.
We're dealing with perceptions, and perceptions are reality.
That's right. And on that note, from a perception standpoint, the being respectful and friendly when you're out on inspection and you're meeting homeowners and home buyers and home sellers, right? And treating everyone in a respectful, friendly way can really go a long way towards not having folks that are pissed off and filing complaints against you.
Right.
And oftentimes, I mean, we insure over 10,000 appraisers. And so I get to see a lot of these cross my desk. And often the folks that are filing these complaints, they feel genuinely disrespected or wronged by the appraiser. And sometimes, that's unavoidable. I'm not here to point the finger at the appraiser, but I think that to the extent that you can really try to be kind to everyone.
Yeah.
That might help in a lot of cases. And then, just generally there are some important things that we like to see in every appraiser's appraisal, disclosures and disclaimers. And, if anyone wants to email me at the end of the podcast, I can send them to you. But one is kind of, this appraisal is not a home inspection. It's not meant to discover latent defects in the home and certify compliance with construction codes and those kinds of things. I mean, it's a long disclaimer and disclosure that I won't try to read to you or cite from memory. And then also, a separate disclaimer that this appraisal is not for the home buyer. That if the home buyer would like to have a valuation of this property before he buys it, maybe he should go out and hire his own appraiser. That the appraisal that you're doing for lending purposes is for the bank. It's not for the home buyer, because the reality is that a lot of the lawsuits and certainly the great majority of complaints that are filed against the appraiser are initiated by the borrower. You're initiated by the homeowner. And so whatever you can do to try to avoid that initiation, but then also protect yourself in the event that they do come after you, they discover defects in their home, there's something really wrong with their home, the value declines perhaps, and they're looking for someone to blame. The more that you can insulate yourself from that, the better off we'll be when we go to defend you.
One of the things we've talked a lot about at the All-Star team, in fact, we had a webinar. We call it the monthly meeting with the coach, where anybody that's a member of the All-Star team can be a part of a online interactive live event. And just last month we talked about the racial bias thing. And instead of focusing on the political side of it, my focus was their own protection. Some of these things you're talking about, some of these words that we know are innocent, right? We know what inferior versus superior means, but that doesn't mean that the reader understands the language that we're using. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. It seems like a silly change, but it's about liability, folks. It's about protecting yourself and making sure that what you think in your head, which I know you listeners, right? You're not biased at heart, but and this is not a systemic problem in my opinion, but could we change the language that we use? Could we be a little bit more kind in the home? Isaac, for years, I've gone into homes as an appraiser and heard this story. Well, the last guy that came, ellipsis. Right. And sometimes I think, okay, come on, really? That really happened? I mean, I'm not saying this out loud, but in my head, I'm thinking that seemed a little crazy. But on the other hand, for some reason, this individual, felt sidelined, and that can lead to all kinds of things. So I really appreciate the great advice. Let's talk about the third rail for just a little bit before we close up here. There's a lot of appraisers out there who, you talk about the hybrid side, right? The desktops. these reports that were pushed by Fannie Mae, and then they kind of held back, and now they're kind of pushing them again. Any thoughts on hybrid appraisals as far as liability goes?
I mean, for one of the questions that we get from a lot of our insureds is, am I covered? Does my E&O insurance cover hybrid appraisals? And with OREP, at least, the answer is yes. Right. Our policy provides broad coverage for almost anything that you do in your capacity as a licensed or certified real estate appraiser. And so there, if you're providing services as in your capacity as an appraiser, there's coverage, whether you're doing a desktop, a hybrid, you're doing right-of-way work, etc. So there is coverage for that type of work. And I understand that there's a very spirited debate about whether appraisers should be doing these types of things. And so, I mean, some of the advice that we offer to appraisers that are interested in doing these types of reports, are around kind of checking and verifying the data. Right, that appraisers are kind of like investigators in the sense that they're already gathering data from different third parties and pulling data from the MLS and pulling data from local records and data companies and sniffing out which data they think is reliable and checking data against other data. And so to the extent that you're doing a desktop or a hybrid and someone is providing you data about the interior of the home, what steps can you take to check and verify that data, to get comfortable around those assignment conditions? And then the other part of that is that there are kind of the main desktop products that the GSEs are offering, but there's a lot of other data companies and AMCs that have developed their own proprietary forms. And we advise our insureds to be really careful about kind of browser submission, hybrid or desktop assignments where, you submit the evaluation on a browser and it kind of disappears and floats away into the ether. In terms of, the appraiser needs to keep a copy of any appraisal report or valuation that they produce. And I've talked to appraisers who submitted something, a short $100 or $150 hybrid report on a browser, and then realized that they made a mistake, that they needed to revise that report and resend it to the client. And they call me and they say, oh, this is the situation. What am I supposed to do? I don't have a copy of it. I can't make any revisions and resubmit it. And that's not a good position to be in as an appraiser. And I worry for you when you call me with that problem.
That's a good way to put it.
Those are just a couple of tips.
Well, and I appreciate that. And one of the things that if people didn't catch this, I want to emphasize it because I hear this all the time. People get on these forums, whether it be Facebook or other ways to communicate between appraisers, and they will say, well, I would never do a desktop and I would never do this. And this is a decline of our industry. And though maybe we don't want to wade into that debate today, one thing that comes up frequently is, well, be careful because E&O doesn't cover desktops. I really appreciate the fact, Isaac, that OREP is different. They understand that appraisals are appraisals and appraisals, and it doesn't matter if you're doing a 1004 or some other thing. An appraisal is an appraisal, and I feel comfortable being with OREP because OREP's got my back. So thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, Dustin. We do.
Thank you for being here. Let's do it again soon, my friend. There's lots of pitfalls out there, folks. Watch out. Be careful where you step. And when you've got OREP and Isaac in your back pocket, things are much, much better than they could be otherwise. Appreciate you taking the time, my friend, and let's do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone wants to learn more about us, you can go to orep.org, or if you want to email me, it's isaac@orep.org. Thank you so much for having me, Dustin. One more thing, Isaac, I just want to repeat that email address because you said earlier that you would send out those disclaimers. I think a lot of listeners are going to want to see that. One more time on your email address. Yeah, it's isaac@orep.org. Thank you, Isaac. All right, have a good one.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.